Roy, today's date is August 1st, 1999, and we're talking to Roy Welch. Roy, for the record, please state your full name and where you currently live.
Roy Moody Welch.
And what is your current profession or occupation, Mr. Welch?
Well, I'm basically retired from the picture frame wholesale and retail business with managing about 50 apartments and looking after the real estate that I have.
And how many years did you manage that retail and wholesale frame?
Well, my dad started in 1918. I came in with the wholesale business, started in 1962. I actually started in Fort Worth and moved back here, and we combined the two businesses about 1963.
Okay. During what years were you a member of First Baptist Church Paris?
Well, I was born, as I said. I joined the church, was baptized September 1931. Then, of course, later on down, I'll tell that a little about the former pastor that was here at that time.
What's your earliest memory of First Baptist Church, Roy?
I think that time when I became a Christian, it was a meaningful decision, even though I don't think that it was presented quite the same as it is now, and so I made a real commitment, but I felt like that nowadays it's mentioned a lot better, and I think people that make decisions know more about what they're doing and did those times.
Your earliest memories of this church were it was located right here in this location, is that correct?
Right here in this location. I do remember, as you asked, what early memories, and of course becoming a Christian, and about that same time is when we built the first brick educational building. And I remember at that time we moved the old wooden building, or it was donated to Emmanuel Baptist Church, and that stands today out there. And
so the original building, the old wooden building, still stands at Emmanuel. So was Emmanuel Baptist Church a planted church? Was that a mission?
No. They were already a regular church. It was, but they didn't have the education. I think it was dismantled mainly because it's a two-story building to get it out there. They couldn't move it as one unit, but they did, and it looks the same. Then we built the brick one and the brick building in 1932, I believe, and cost of that building was $55,000. And I remembered as a 10-year-old child, I felt like I needed to be a part of it, and my donation was $5. And so we were able to raise all the money to build that building.
Do you remember at that time when you gave $5, do you remember what some things cost? Like what a bubble gum cost or a Coca-Cola?
Oh, penny on bubble gum.
Penny on bubble gum.
Yeah, cold drinks were a nickel.
Cold drinks were a nickel. So giving $5 for a 10-year-old boy is pretty good amount of money.
I had to raise it to mow
Did you have a job?
Things like that. I'd mow yards and whatever I could. My dad was at the Alexander Book Company for years and years. He was one of the partners there, and I remembered my first job in school was to work at the store doing school rush once a year. They had an old hand-operated elevator. So I had the job of holding all of the school supplies down and keeping the stock downstairs from the third floor down. I was probably 10 years old then.
Right. Roy, tell us the first pastor at this church that you remember.
Well, Dr. Kendall had just resigned to go to Belton to be president of Mary Hardin Baylor College, and he became ill. Dr. Wright was called to be pastor. He came here the month I was born. I was the first baby he came to see. He baptized me in 1931, and of course married my wife and I in February 1945. So,
what hospital were you born in, just out of curiosity?
I was born at home.
Oh, you were born at home. Okay.
Yeah.
That's great. Okay, keep going.
And that was basically it. This has always been my church. Of course, at times when I was in service, I transferred my membership. When we had to move to Fort Worth because of my job change for about 7 years. And, of course, I was a member, immediately joined the church over there. So, but whenever we came back to Paris, we came back home, to church.
Roy, tell me some of the memories that you have of Sunday school teachers and vacation Bible school teachers and training union and pastors. Some of the personalities that might stand out in this church back in those days.
Well, we had two elderly, I say they seemed elderly to us at that time, Mary and Irma Simmons. They worked in the preschool area, and I was nursery then, and I can remember them very well. And of course, Mrs. T.D. Welch Sr. was their sister, and she was real active as a Sunday school superintendent and teacher too along the way. But I remember them as my first ones.
How do you remember them? What kind of persons were they? What stands out?
They were dedicated ladies. I mean, they really and truly did their job the best they could, and you get to where you loved them because you look forward to being there with them on Sunday morning. And then, of course, Walton Skinner was one, as I grew up, one of my teachers that I remembered in the early years after I'd gotten up into probably nearly grown. And Harold Davis. Harold tells me today that I was in his first class that he taught in church to adults. I was probably just about 20 years old then, maybe less than that. Mm-hmm. And he relates to that I was in his first class. Of course, he had taught children in earlier years. And of course, Dr. Revis, kind of a fun thing about it, Dr. Revis was here about 5 years, and he went on to North Carolina to be pastor. And in 1952, we made a trip up through Canada and came back through, and didn't let him know that we were coming, so we stayed on Saturday night. Sunday morning, we were right where we usually sit in the center, down close to the front, and he got up there to preach, and all he said was, Mabel, I see Roy Welch's shining countenance out there. So I was, as you know, I was bald-headed then. So I'll remember that always.
How did you get to church when you got on Sunday morning to come to church? Did you come in a car? Did you walk?
Always in a car, because we always lived way out in West Parish.
Way out in West Parish?
Yeah, it was way out on 24th Street now, but Dad built that house when I was 6 years old. And we always had a pickup. That's usually what we came in.
Same house?
Hmm?
Same house?
Same house. It's still there. Yeah, I know. I planned the other day. I drove around through all the houses I lived in Paris. I'm going to go out and take some pictures of each one of them and keep those.
Roy, back in those days, did they have a youth department like they have today, and what was it like?
No, it wasn't like it is today, but it was really important. I think it was. We had different names for them then. Let's see, what did we call that area? But
who were some of the people you remember being with you in the youth department, or being your age group at the church? Didn't expect that question, did you?
No, I didn't expect that one, because honestly, a lot of them are still here and in the church or in town, and so I've known them so long I can't exactly put them at the time that.
Did you go to church camp?
Yeah, we did that.
Where?
But not as much as they have in later years.
Where'd you go to church camp?
The RAs were real good. I remember that.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to think of the lady's name, the lady that led that, and we used to go to her house and get together during the week and times, and of course we'd camp out sometime once, not like they do now, not as much. It didn't make the long mission trips like they do now.
Do you remember where you went to church camp? Was it like Lake Lavon or someplace like that?
No, we didn't. I can't remember any of those.
Tell me, Roy, based on your recollections, how have Sunday clothes changed since you began?
Well, I think probably casual clothes are worn a lot more now than they were then. Especially, we never did have any shorts in church, and of course now that's the thing that most everybody does. Whereas I'm doing when it's warm weather, especially. And but everybody dressed up the best they can when they come to church. Their Sunday go to meet in church, clothes.
Now I can just imagine that it was nicely air conditioned and cool inside the sanctuary in the middle of summer.
No air conditioning.
No air conditioning.
No air conditioning. That was the job of some of the ushers to go open all the windows in the old sanctuary, and of course we had lots of ceiling fans all over. I don't know how many, but they all hung from the ceiling all over the sanctuary. And of course, with the windows being open, no ceiling fans, it worked pretty good.
Did you ever get any bugs or birds that come into the sanctuary?
Yeah. I've seen birds. In fact, I think I remember Dr. Semple having a bird flying around over him while he was preaching.
Can you remember any really funny instances or anecdotes about the church when you were here that maybe we could record?
Well, we started in 1971 what we call a double miracle day, and the first one was the largest we ever had. The whole church worked at it. As far as numbers, counted a whole lot because we felt like we'd get a large number here. We'd make a lot of contacts and follow through on those, and other decisions would be made along the way. We had almost 2,500 people in Sunday school that Sunday. We had to divide up our groups all over. We had the children in the basement where the fellowship hall is now. We had the youth in the old gym over high school gym, back of the post office. We had the ladies in the sanctuary, and we had a tent across the street and for all the men. And it came a downpour rain that night. I was coming in from Dallas, I think, and it was, it just poured down. It just flooded everything. So we thought we'd be rained out, but we really were not. The men had to wade water to get in there and stand in water some in the tent. Everybody else was in their place. And the fun thing about that was, of course, it was my responsibility as Sunday school director to get the count, because we had different people in each area to give us the count on what they had in the youth and the children and all. So I got it all together, and I ran into the pastor's study to tell him what it was. Jerry Clower was our guest that day, and so the first thing Jerry did, he got up in the pulpit, and he said, "You know, boy, this is something." Said that little bald-headed man with the Elvis Presley coat came running in to tell us about how many we had in Sunday school. And of course, that was my double miracle day coat that I wore several years in a row after that, because he had done that. But that was an experience.
How many years have you been the director for Sunday school?
I was in 1970. I was elected outreach director the first year they started that program. Dorsey Mackey was the overall outreach director, and I was adult outreach director. Then I was on the nominating committee that year, and I missed a meeting. Bob Kennedy was chairman, Dorsey was on the committee, and I was on the committee, and I don't remember who else. But when I came back at the next meeting, they had elected me Sunday school director. So from 1971 on till now, I've had that job and have enjoyed it all these years.
That'll teach you to miss a meeting, won't it?
That's right.
Roy, do you particularly remember any special mission emphasis or building emphasis or outreach emphasis type activities that kind of stick in your mind over the years?
Well, of course, when Dr. Revis was here, he was mission-minded. Mm-hmm. And we all over the town, we set up missions. One on 7th Street, one on Graham Street. They were just different places, and our church members took their membership and moved over there with them to help them get started, some of our members. And of course...
what are some of those churches today?
Well, Graham Street's still in existence. 7th Street has merged with and now become South Parish. Not sure what Spring Lake, I guess, was one too. And I can't remember any others.
How about East Parish Baptist today?
No. East Parish came actually around from Ramsey Baptist.
Okay. But
They
Ramsey
branched off from Ramsey.
Okay. Any special foreign missions emphasis that stick out in your mind? Any Lottie Moon offerings or anything around that particularly sticks out?
Well, of course, we made a lot of mission trips and things, especially with the youth and all, and over the years. And I enjoyed probably the one that I did and enjoyed more and received a blessing more was when we went to Trenton, Michigan. That's a suburb of Detroit. Mm-hmm. And we really had a successful.
Why was it so special for you?
Well, I think we had more decisions, and I was involved maybe a little more in helping some of those folks and relating to them and to make their decisions. And
how did y'all get there?
We went up. We flew up there.
Flew up there?
Yeah, I believe we did. Flew up there. I've been on several. I was trying to think on that one whether we flew or drove. That's, though, where we got our first travel bus. Mm. There was a bus up there in Trenton that it was kept in the fire station, and just like a new one that they used to carry the senior citizens around on different things. That's all it was ever used for. Low mileage, everything, but they had decided not to do that anymore, and so we bought it. And of course, we had to send somebody up there to drive it home. That was it was a bad situation. It wasn't the best of all. It gave us trouble after that for a while, but it looked like a good thing. It wasn't really and truly to be a good road bus. It was more of a city big bus.
Building programs, Roy, are oftentimes noted as being real blessings for many churches and sometimes being kind of controversial. Do you remember any major building programs in the past history of the church and what they were like?
Of course, that little bit I was involved in as a child, but then the next was when we had our sanctuary. That was really involved in that, in building that on the committee. And I think this, that I'd always, as a young adult and family, seemed like it a little hard to tithe. Felt like I just never did quite reach. But when we made that our decisions of what we were going to give to that building fund for the sanctuary, well, I was able to do that and never missed that. From then on, my time was up on that, I carried it on to me, and it put me as a tither, and I've been a tither and believe in it ever since.
Do you remember how much that building program was for that new sanctuary? Probably not.
Probably about 200,000 plus.
What year would that have been approximately? Maybe.
I'd say in the
early
60s. Yeah.
Seems like that was about right.
And then, of course, the next building program was the Family Life Center. It's involved in that.
What committees have you served on, and are there any special memories of any of those committees?
Well, I've served on quite a few of the committees, not all. Nominating committee, or I was chairman of the personnel committee, and I think probably the one that I cherish more than anything is the pastor search committee. Mm-hmm. And that's when we traveled all over the United States. We made trips to Phoenix, Arizona. We made trips to Alabama and Missouri and all around, and ended up getting our pastor from Palestine, Texas.
And he would have been who?
Dwight Blankenship.
Dwight Blankenship. And you, that would have been what year, approximately?
Let's see, it's about 8 years ago.
8 years ago, okay. What role did this church and its members play during World War II?
Real good. Dr. White was pastor.
Mm-hmm.
And he hadn't been here long. Came from up in Oklahoma. I think of the name. In fact, I carried him back up there one time just to visit his old church a few years ago. But he just really did minister to the soldiers at Camp Maxey. The whole church people and all. I was in the service, so I was home and weekends and things. Sometimes I never did go overseas, but I got to view that and all. And I think this church really did more for the soldiers than by far than any of the churches.
What branch of the service were you in?
Air Force, Air Corps then.
Air Corps.
That's part of the Air Force, out of the Army.
And so what did we do at Camp Maxey? Did we have Did we go out there and have worship services?
I think they brought them in here to the church more than anything else, and had them to visit and visit within their homes, and the members did, and things like that. That just really.
I think there was some prisoner of war. There were some POWs out there. Did we have any?
There was a prisoner of war camp. I'm not familiar with them ever letting anybody out on that.
Do you particularly remember any revivals or revival speakers that made an impression on you during your years?
Well, of course, when I was small, we had these evangelists coming through in maybe 2 or 3 weeks of revival. And I remember one, I can't remember the man's name, but he long white coat, and he was a powerful preacher. But the first one that I really remember that we had that made lots of decisions was Eddie Martin. I think that maybe we had him twice, but we had a tent set up out the fairground, and it went on for, it may have gone 2 weeks, and we had lots of decisions.
In the summer?
In the summer, yeah.
I bet it was hot under that tent.
It was, yeah. The next one I remember was in 1981. That I feel like was one of the best, and that was Bailey Smith was the evangelist, and my job has been for the number of years to be down at the front and getting the counselors for each person. Well, of course, they were coming down so many that we actually baptized. There was over 100 decisions. And I don't know how many were baptized that night, but there was a tremendous amount. We had Dr. Simple and Larry Martin both in the baptistry, both baptized at the same time.
Can you think of any one First Baptist member who's made a special impression on your life? And if so, who was it, and how did they affect you, Roy?
Well, L.C. Johnson.
L.C. Johnson
was probably the one that I did. And when I was in trouble or didn't know what to do about different things in church and things, I'd go visit L.C. and Hazel. Mm-hmm. And he was really good at counseling. He let me know what to do. And as long as I followed his advice, I did all right.
That's great. Are there any previous staff members you'd like to tell us about?
Oh, boy.
Oh, boy.
That's a good one. James Petrie.
James Petrie.
James Petrie was Minister of Education the year I went in as Sunday School Director. And, of course, I blame him for influencing the committee on that. But he was a tremendous leader, worker. I tell you, of course, we've got one now that's the worker that he was, and the dreamer that he was, maybe more so of a dreamer as far as coming up with new things to do. But James Petrie would get in there and work and do it himself, whatever needed to be done. And, of course, all of the remodeling, well, he was here when we built the sanctuary, and then, of course, remodeling the old buildings and the old sanctuary into Sunday school. And we didn't use the top floor as we're not using it right now, but we're getting ready to use it. That was Seventh Heaven. That was the first really recreation place similar to a Family Life Center. We had ping pong tables, pool tables, and everything up there.
On the 7th floor?
They called it Seventh Heaven, but it was the 4th floor.
4th floor, okay. Yeah. I was going to say, I'm trying to count floors. 4th floor.
And now we're renovating that now, and we'll be able to use it in Sunday school. And James Petrie was he had a temper, but he was a mover and a shaker. He was a mover and a shuffler. That's right. And we had good years, and he went on to Ridgecrest to manage things over there, and then later on into other churches. But he's gone on to be with the Lord now.
Any other staff members that impress you?
Well, I think we had, of course, I served under 3 pastors. Dr. Simple was the first, and Dwight Blankenship next, and, of course, Sid Young next. But under Administrative Education, James Petrie was the first. Dudley Johnson followed him. Dudley was a good one, of course. And, of course, Mike Sims. And then Tom Lane was the last. Tom served longer than anybody, and I was with him over 10 years. And now our little young Eric Wilkins,
young Eric,
who is certainly
a fireball.
And I can't say that I didn't enjoy working with all of them.
Do you ever have any idea how many we were running in Sunday school back when you began, and versus how many we're running now?
Well, we're running a little less than Sunday school back. And when we had the double miracle days each year, that would pep us up some, and we did. And of course, all along that time, our bus ministry was growing. Jesse Thrasher headed the bus ministry up for a number of years till we had staff come on and do that. And I remember on one of those days that he brought over 100 in on his. He didn't have them all in the bus. He had his Suburban behind it. And they were hanging out the windows. He really brought them in. And we had a lot. I don't know how many buses we were running, but we brought in a lot. And the other thing that caused our number to be, that's one of the things that had our number of members and up above what it is now. We're basically probably close to on the in-house membership as we were at any of our time, or at least we were when Doc Sid was here. But the other thing was that our nursing home ministry, that kept growing. When I went in as Sunday school director, all we had was a Sunday school class at the Gibraltar Hotel. And we just started the one at Cherry Street Manor. And so from that on, each time they built another nursing home, we started a new class. All of them had exceptional teachers, some of them retired pastors. And those two things is what made our growth get so much bigger. Now then, the bus ministry has dropped way down, and the nursing home ministry has dropped down, so that even though we still have nine off-campus Sunday schools, they're not as many members. In the Cherry Street Manor, I can remember one time a double miracle day, and of course we encouraged them to have a large number out as they could have. And Cherry Street Manor had over 100 of their patients in Sunday school that day.
Wow.
One lady, a retired nurse, mind was good, bedridden, wanted so much to come to Sunday school. We rolled her out, bed and all, into there where we had the class. Katie Bills. I'll always remember that. She was close enough she could hear always from her room, but she wanted to be a part of it. So those two things made our number get big, and as of now, it's still close to what we run.
And made an impression on some lives.
Oh, yeah.
Roy, how have staff positions changed since you first became a member at First Baptist?
Well, of course, when I first became a member of the church, well, we had a pastor and a part-time music director and a part-time church secretary, and that's it. So as time went on, he added staff members. But, of course, I've always been a believer that lay people need to do it if they can. We need leadership, and as time goes on, we've had to add these leaders in different areas to bring it on. But our lay people kind of fall back more now than they used to. And so that's what I'd like to see is more of it. Even though we need the staff we've got a tremendous staff now, the best I've ever seen in our church. And so every one of them do a good job.
Well, you have always been a strong leader and encourager for people to volunteer to do things. I don't know, you must have one telephone ear that's completely worn out just from calling people on the phone to get them to come do this and to do that. That's sort of your hallmark. Something.
Yeah, I do have two telephones. One is calls come in all the time to my answering machine. The other one I use to call out on. But that's not always used for that, but I just like to visit with people. We're right now getting ready to have our 60th class reunion, high school class reunion, and I'm in charge of it. So when we get most of the reservations in, well, I'll end up calling all of them that didn't. Even though I may not get them to come, but I'll enjoy talking to them and finding out a little about how they're doing in California or wherever.
Mm-hmm. What kind of positions did your parents hold at First Baptist, and how long were they members?
They were faithful members. Mother always sang in the choir. As I mentioned a while ago, that Thetis Williams started playing the organ in 1919, and she was actually choir director and organist at first. And Mother was always in the choir with Mrs. Burgess. And
was the choir as big as it is now in those days?
No. It was the choir loft was small up above the platform, in the old sanctuary.
Where was the baptistry in those days?
Baptistry was, at one time, was up there, and then they moved it down, lower floor. And and my dad was a regular usher. That's basically all they did.
And what was his occupation? I may have asked you that.
He was in the Alexander Book Company as a partner, and of course headed up the picture framing business part of it, which the business, that part of it, went back into the 1800s. We don't know how far back, but then he came in with me in another business venture back in 1949. And he kept his picture frame business. He did that all the time.
You have any brothers and sisters that were raised in this church?
No brothers and sisters.
No brothers and sisters. What one thing would you like to see this church accomplish in the next year?
Well, I hope it's before this next year gets here, but I'd like to, so we need a pastor.
Need a pastor.
I think a pastor is really something. Of course, we've got projects that we had a master plan committee that worked hard, a long-range plan committee, and I'd like to see some of those things happen, even to be able to build our, which is in the future, our children's building, and renovate all of the buildings that we have now that we can be using them all. And so there's so many things that need to be done. And of course, above all, right now, is to get the elevator in.
Got to get that elevator in. So I assume, Roy, you're going to be director of Sunday school for at least 20 more years, right?
No.
No.
I think I do what I can, but we need young blood, and Eric knows that. And he's right now. I think Eric is looking for someone he can get to work with me a little while and be able to take. I'm not going to quit. My job then will be to just take care of the off-campus ministry. I'm looking forward to now starting another one. As far as the nursing home, we've lost one nursing home being closed, so we're going to make up for that by starting another one. So even though the numbers in each one's dropped, we still do that ministry. That's what I'll try. And the homebound ministry has been neglected.
Roy, any other thoughts about the church history or personalities in the church that you can remember that we ought to ask you about that were important and meaningful as you were coming in the years that you've been a member of this church?
That's one question I hadn't thought about.
Which pastor stuck out in your mind as being the most, not the best or the worst, but just stuck out in your mind?
There's no question that Dr. Wright was a pastor to the town. Mm-hmm. When they had his funeral, even the Catholic priests wanted to be a part of it. And even though it had been a number of years since he had been pastor and moved back here and retired, he was our pastor emeritus. But he was tremendous. I feel like that if Sid Young had stayed here because of our television ministry and all, he would have equaled him as a pastor to the town, because the people in the community all seemed to know him, and they all, because even though they'd never sat in church with him, but through our television ministry, well, they've been able to, and there's no question he would have been that.
Do you remember when we first went on the radio? That would have
radio.
Been that would have been our first. I assume our first outreach to the community, electronic outreach. That question.
I would think that it was probably maybe in Ronald Prince's time, or maybe when Doc Central came.
Maybe Riley before him.
Riley. Maybe go back to Riley. I'm not sure, but it's been a long. Yeah, I guess so. Back maybe to Riley. On the radio, television, of course, came along.
Roy, as you've been in leadership roles in the church. Has there ever been discussion at all of moving this church away from this present location? Even back in the old days, or just
no? Well, I don't think back in the old days that I would know about, but before we built the sanctuary where we did, that was discussed, and at that time the church voted to stay here and go ahead with it. We had too much investment here to do it. We had some land possibly offered to us, to donation and all, but that was the vote to stay here. So,
okay. Well, today again is August 1st, 1999. My name is Ron Ragan, and we have been interviewing Roy Moody Welch, an icon and personality at First Baptist Church for many, many years, and one who, if anyone knows the history, he certainly will. Roy, we really appreciate you taking the time this Sunday afternoon to come up here and share your thoughts and tell us a little bit about the history of the church. And God bless you and your ministry.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Enjoyed it.
All right.